Hi, everyone. As you're coming in, we're going to get started in about 45 seconds here just to let people in. So as you're coming in, know that we are getting started in, let's say, 30 seconds now. All right, everybody, as you're coming in here, we're going to get started in about 20 seconds. All right, let's get started. So welcome everyone to our presentation today of evaluating grant opportunities for your organization. For those of you who did not attend last month, my name is Matt Carter. I am with Grants Plus, and we are putting these on in cooperation with NCCER. So a quick note about our partnership, if I can get to the slide. So Grants Plus and NCCER are partnering to help all of NCCER's partner organizations up their grant seeking game. I know that a lot of you are having to go to private funders and having to look for grants for the first time. Mostly for the excellent reason that you're doing great work and it's expanding. So NCCER wants to make sure that you have the resources you need to do that. And I am happy that Grants Plus gets to do that. So a little bit about Grants Plus. We are a national grant seeking firm. We have been around since about 2007 and have both clients and staff all over the US. We help organizations to raise money. That's as simple as we can put it. We've got about 30 staff now working all over the country, and our stat here is out of date on 230 million. I think at this point we're very close to 250 million total raised for organizations to help do the great work they're doing. And one of those things we do is trainings with organizations to help you be great grant seekers too. And that is most of my job, and I am just thrilled that I get to do this today. So let's talk a little bit about what is available with our partnership here. It's not just these. So we have a few things here. Obviously, we have this webinar series, which with monthly webinars through February of 2023. With the exception of December, they are the third Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. So we're hoping you can join us for the series. We also have a great resource page that if you signed up for this, you have been to, with pre-vetted funding opportunities that support the work that you do. And we'll talk really quickly about those in a little bit. We're also offering one-on-one coaching sessions, and these are to help you either, it gets you 30 minutes with one of our grants experts, either me or one of our other more senior staff, to do a one-on-one session about anything that's vexing you on grants. So whether that is how to get started, whether that's how to approach a specific funder, whether that is how to talk about the work you do in a funder-friendly way, whatever that is, we are happy to do those, and those are available to the people on this webinar today. We also have a series of grant seeking guides, and those are some really good one-pagers that are a good reminder of the things we're talking about on these webinars, but also for you to share with other staff, with contractors that you work with anyone who kind of wants to know how this whole thing works. There's some great one-pagers on that are available on that page. So that is where we are. That's what we're doing. So let's get started with today. But before we do that, one last thing. Please use the Q&A feature to ask questions at any time. We will be monitoring chat and the Q&A, but it's easier to find things through Q&A, so I'm asking that you use that. We're also going to have some polls and some questions here throughout, so I would ask that you please pay attention and vote in those. And let's go. So today's learning objectives, a few things. We are going to understand how to evaluate private foundations' interest in your work. So this is non-government funding. This is community foundations, family foundations, corporate foundations, all of that. We're going to do a little practice session on using public information from foundations to evaluate if you're a good fit with them. We're going to talk then about federal grant program announcements and potential fit with your work, and then evaluate one of those, and knowing if it's worth applying for a government grant. So I'm talking about federal because we have people from a whole bunch of states, but it is applicable to state grants as well. So knowing if the effort is worth it. So let's get started. But before we do that, I want to launch a quick poll. I warned you those were coming. So just to have a sense of where you all are in your grant seeking journey, I would ask that you please vote here on what best reflects your experience with grants. We'll have about 30 seconds here. Okay, we have a good variety. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, so good variety today. Some of you have never even thought about it. Some of you have never actually done it. And a couple of you have applied and gotten funding. So this is great. I promise you this will be useful for all of you. For those of you who've done this before, it will help you do this more efficiently. And for those of you who haven't done it, I'm hoping we can take some of the edge off of the uncertainty of whether you should apply or not, and get you confident at evaluating a potential funding opportunity. So let's get going. So first things first, let's talk about finding your fit. And I have to give my little pep talk. People sometimes are afraid to ask for money because they think that they don't want to impose, they don't want to be begging. And that's not what grant seeking is. Grant makers are trying to create some change in the world. They exist to make some change, whether that's in their town or around the world. And they can't do it themselves. All they have is money. They don't have the staff to do it. We have the staff to do it. So thinking about it this way, to get funding, your work has to create the change in the world that a grant maker wants to see. You have to sell them what they're buying. If they are not buying what you're selling, it doesn't matter how great your program is. It doesn't matter how good of a grant proposal you write. They're not going to fund you. The good news is it's pretty easy to make sure that you are doing and creating the change that funders want to see. So great grant seeking makes the connection between what you are doing obvious to the funder, whether that's in a discussion with them, whether that is in your proposal, whatever that is. Great grant seeking is simply letting a funder know that you are making the change that they want to see and that you are selling what they want to buy. So while I'm going through this here, I'd love to see if you guys could drop into chat. I know I just said use Q&A. What change is your organization selling? What are you doing? What impact are you making on the world? And I will get back to that in a moment. So let's talk about the factors of finding your fit. So this is not exactly a flow chart, but it is real close to one. So when you're looking at a funder, and this actually counts for government and for private, you need to have a geography that matches with the funder's geography. You need to be serving the population the funder wants to serve. You need to have a program that advances the mission of that funder. You need to have a match between the activities you're doing and the activities that the funder wants to fund. We'll talk about that. And the funder needs to have an openness to new grantees. So rolling through this, if you can answer yes on all of these, that you've got a match on all of those, and there's an openness, that is a funder that you want to approach. So let's talk about these all a little more in detail. And I've got this neat little grid here. We've got our, all the way to the left, we've got our check mark for yes. In the middle, we've got our exclamation point for maybe. And on the right side, we've got our X for no. So let's talk about what this means for geography. So if you are looking at a funder and they have made grants in your area before, or they have made grants in a lot of different areas, maybe not exactly where you are, but kind of all over the state, all over the country, including some that are near you, that's a go. If they have a specific geographic focus, that includes you, but they haven't made grants where you are or near you before, or if they have no real pattern in their grant seeking or grant making, that's a maybe. That's a little bit iffy. And then if they have a specific geography that does not include you, they want to fund in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and you're not in one of those states, doesn't matter how good your program is, they're not going to fund you. Also, if they have no specified geography, they don't say where they fund, but there's no grants near you, probably not a good fit. So one to ignore. So let's talk about this here. So we've got an imaginary program here that does training in multiple areas in Eastern Colorado. And they are looking at a funder that's based in Boulder and that has made grants in Boulder, Denver, and Colorado Springs. So I'm going to do a quick poll here. You tell me what this fit is here. Is this a great program and funder fit? Okay, I've got a couple votes in. Oh, I like this. You guys are good. All right, 5 more seconds. Beautiful. Okay. I would say the correct answer is somewhere between great fit and so-so fit. I think they're a great fit geographically. They fund where the organization is working. However, they may not fund work everywhere. So you may have to be specific about exactly what program you're looking for. So it is, I would say a great fit, but I'm not going to take points off for anybody who said so-so fit. So good work. Next up is population. So again, if you're looking at a funder in this yes category, has made grants or programs to organizations that serve exactly who you serve. So if I talked to an organization this morning that's largely serving transition age people, so like 18 to 25, you're looking at a funder that has funded a whole bunch of programs for that age group, good to go. That is the same population as you. They have made grants to programs or organizations that serve people close to yours. So you are a program that serves people not traditionally represented in construction, and you're finding an organization that serves women and minorities. Pretty close, a lot of overlap there. That is pretty good. The bad one is you cannot find any grants for organizations or programs that serve the population you serve. So again, let's see what that looks like in a little game here. So we have a program that is focused on populations that are facing multiple barriers to employment with an emphasis on basic career training. So you can imagine who that is. The funder has funded multiple human service programs designed to help people achieve self-sustained lives, including programs for seniors and for young parents. And they have funded programs for people that are coming out of incarceration. So let's bring up our poll on population and see what the crowd thinks. Based on what you know of this program and based on the population that it serves, is this a good funder? All right, I think we have almost a consensus. I'll give us 5 more seconds here. Okay. So we have a 2/3, 1/3 split. I am going to say great fit because they care about people trying to build sustainable lives, and people transitioning out of the prison system are in there. That is a barrier to employment. So I think they're a great fit. I could see why you would vote so-so because it's not exactly the right population, but it is real close. So I think this is a great fit. So let's talk about mission match. And this one can be a little bit not as indicative as past grants, but let's talk about mission. So obviously, if your work supports the funder's mission, good to go. Like this, if you ever found a funder that said our mission is to help adults train for a high quality job that does not require a 4-year degree, run, don't walk to apply to that funder. Maybe you support part of the funder's mission. So you're looking at this where they're trying to help low income people move to sustainable lives. A lot of what your organizations do that. So I think that's a pretty good one. And then our no is your work doesn't impact the funder's mission at all. So our mission is to help people over 65 live fulfilling lives. Unless some of you are recruiting seniors for third careers, there is not a match there. So let's play a little game again. So with our mission match, we've got a program that provides craft training for adults entering second careers, especially those whose previous jobs are being phased out. So maybe they were, I don't know, whatever the 2022 version of a buggy whip maker was in 1910. So the organization says that our mission is to ensure that every young adult leaves high school with a clear pathway to training or higher education that will lead to a successful life. So what do we think? Is this a great fit? Is this a so-so fit? Or is this not a fit? Give this about 5 more seconds. You guys are answering these quickly now. Okay. So 80% say not a fit and 1 says a great fit. I am going with not a fit on this one, provided that the funder actually sticks to their mission. Since what we're talking about here is focused on mid-career adults and the funder is focused on transition age kids, maybe if you run into this funder at a party, talk to them about what you're doing, but I would definitely not make them a priority on your list of funders to contact. So the next one is a little bit, I'm trying to not get on my soapbox about it, but some funders only fund specific activities. So for example, they won't fund capital, or they won't fund transportation, or they won't fund food for kids for summer programming, for example. So you want to make sure that whatever your program needs, the funder will fund. So obviously, if they have a history of making grants for your needs, that is the fit. So if you need capital funding, they've funded capital before. You need transportation, they funded transportation before. You are good to go. The funder has made some grants that maybe meet some of your needs. That's a little hard to come up with a middle on that one. You can maybe get away with that with some creative tracking. If the funder says, well, we'll pay salaries, but we won't pay transportation, as long as you're tracking the way that grant is spent well, you can maybe get away with that. Your no is obviously the funder doesn't support your needs. You're doing a capital project and they do not fund capital, or the ones that stick in my craw are staffing, transportation, and administration, as if your administrative costs are unimportant to your programming. So if you've got a funder, you need to fund transportation, you need to fund a new instructor, something like that, and this funder doesn't fund those things, even if they fund, even if they fund job training, if they don't fund those things and that's what you need, you can do a little robbing Peter to pay Paul, but in general, that is not going to be a great fit. So let us go to our fun pretend organization here. So our program, like so many of you, needs funding to equip a new hands-on learning space for their carpentry program. The funder supports workforce development programs, but then says on their website, funding from the foundation can be used for salaries and program expenses, but we do not support capital projects. So let's see, what do we think about this one? Give this about 5 more seconds here. Oh, you guys are good. This was supposed to be a trick question. All right, so this really was a trick question. I would say they are a so-so fit, not a no, because you need a building and you need stuff. You need to build the building and you need to equip it. So I would at least talk to them about equipping. So somebody else is paying for the building itself. You've got other funders for that. They support workforce development, so they care about what you do mission-wise. So I would at least approach them maybe about funding the equipment that you need if they're not willing to fund the bricks and mortar. So not a great fit, but definitely one that at least has some potential. So our last one is openness to new grantees. And this can be a little bit interesting. So they're a yes if they have clear contact information. You're looking at their website, they're like, please contact us with any questions. Especially if you're a new grantee, please contact us before submitting. That is a yes on openness. Or if they have somewhere on their website or in their materials where they say, please send us a 2-page letter about your program, we'd love to hear about it. Email our program officer, we always love to learn more. That is someone very open to new grantees, and you should go talk to them. Maybe this middle category, maybe they don't have contact information on their site very obviously, but they don't explicitly say don't contact us. And they will say that they don't select unsolicited proposals. This generally means that you need to have a contact. They don't just want you to send them something in the mail. Doesn't necessarily mean no, doesn't necessarily mean yes. And you do see when you're looking at their website or you're looking at their other materials that they do make new grants every year. It's not the same organizations every single year. So they do have to have some openness somewhere. So they're in the maybe. And your no category on this one is that they explicitly say they only give to pre-selected organizations. There are a lot of especially family foundations out there that want to support the hospital, their kids' school, their alma mater, and the art museum, and that's it. And they support those every year. If that's what you're seeing when you look at them, you look at their website, you look at their giving, they're a no. The other thing too is, yeah, if you then look and you see that they only give to the same organizations for real, like their giving is just to those, they're probably not going to fund you. Don't put them at the bottom of the list, or don't bother with them. All right, so we have one more of our good fit game here. So your program is seeking grants from new funders to expand to serve more people. I know that's not any of you. None of you are trying to do that, but bear with us. It's an imaginary example. The funder supports a core group of organizations annually. You can see they're funding those things, but about half of its grants from year to year change. Also, you can see on their website that it lists its staff, but doesn't say, please contact Jim for questions, but they do list the staff, who is in charge of their workforce development work. And they have an inquiry form on their website that says, interested in applying, talk to us. So this one is kind of a gimme. Let's see where we are here on this one. We've got the poll open. All right, we have a lot of agreement here. All right. Okay, so we have a lot of agreement until the last vote came in. So we were at 100% on so-so. I would say they are a so-so towards great, because they do have that core group of organizations, but you can see that they're open to new grantees. They do make some new grants year to year. They do have their staff, so you know who to maybe contact, but it doesn't say, just call Jim. And the inquiry form too means they at least are open to talking to organizations. So I wouldn't make this first on my list, but I might make them third or fourth, especially if they have a great mission fit or great fit with the other things. So I would say they are somewhere between so-so and great, not so-so and not. So good work on that one. You guys were good. I think the majority won every single time. All right, so let's talk about, with all of those things in mind, knowing that little flow chart, let's talk about how we actually evaluate this in the real world. So funder information is out there. One of the ways that you guys can get to it very easily is the same resource page where you signed up for this. We have got a whole bunch of kind of pre-vetted grant opportunities on there for you to look through based on the categories that we're showing here. I take a look through those if you haven't. There is some good stuff in there. And most of those, if you click on them, and I'm not going to go live on this because that is always challenging in a webinar to flip to a live web page. But when you go to them, you'll see there's a little bit of info about it, and then there'll be a learn more that goes to their website. And I think in almost every case, these funders have websites. So going to their website is the number one thing to do. Shocking in 2022 that going to an organization's website is the best way to learn about it, I know. But you want to look for a few things. You want to see their mission statement. You want to look for their program guidelines. You want to see who they've funded before. So by the way, mission statement and program guidelines are great, but past grantees is where the truth is. A lot of organizations have these very flowery mission statements, will have great program guidelines that sound like they fit, and then you look at their past grantees and they have very little to do with what those two are. It doesn't happen often, but it happens. So past grantees is sort of a check on these other two. Also, you're looking for contact information and the application process. And I happen to have found a great funder from our list to look at. So again, not live on the website here because that's always challenging, but we're looking at some screenshots. So using everything we just learned, let's talk about the Topfer Family Foundation. So it looks like from their mission statement right here on the front page of their website, connecting people to the resources that they need to build self-sufficient and fulfilling lives. That sounds like a lot of what your organizations are doing. So I'm already intrigued, but of course, I want to double check on this. So let's see, let's check out the About Our Grants section up here on the top. So under there, they have their program areas. And again, screenshot, youth enrichment has nothing to do with us, but let's look at job training and support services. This sounds a lot like what all of you are doing. We're talking about a livable wage. We're talking about job training that lets people increase their earning potential through sustainable and meaningful employment. They're talking about vocational training. They're talking about life skills training, multiple needs of the individual. Again, that sounds like a lot of NCCER's partners. There's a lot of you are doing that. So this sounds great. So let's see what else we can think about here. Do they have a specific geographic focus? Now, this was in their FAQ. It also appears a couple other places on their site. Yes, they care largely about Austin and Chicago. All right, so if I'm an organization in Austin and Chicago, I'm still in. Their preference is giving to organizations focusing on Chicago, great. But also, they have recently started to provide grants in Denver and Broward County, Florida. Interesting. So you can see here they have a little thing of if you're in Denver or in Broward County, reach out. Great. They want us to reach out and talk. Perfect. So again, if we fit that geography, we already match the mission. Our program already matches what they want to fund. If we match that geography, we keep going. But let's see what the reality is here. What are they actually funding? And I have to say the actual funding is slightly less great than everything else. Because if you're looking, they are in their job category, they're including supportive services for low-income people. And a lot of it, there is some employment stuff here. Like the first one is to support education to employment. There's definitely some money going to job training, but it is not a huge focus within that category. So that's let's not call that a red flag. Let's call it a slight yellow flag. Again, nothing that would stop me from talking to them, but it might not make them the first person I go to if I'm doing, a lot of the work that you guys are doing, but they are definitely still in the running. So let's also look at their application process. Oh, this is a good one. They have the whole process done here. They have these nice little notes here if you're in Chicago, here's what you need to know. If you're in Denver or Broward County, here's what you need to know. Again, with that, please contact us first. So all in all, this is the information that you need. They have pretty much have spelled out who they want to fund, which is great. That is 100% what you want to see on a funder website. So the online application. So they have an application process. This is great. What's not shown is that they do say they will accept applications at any time, and I think review them at quarterly board meetings. But again, you have everything you need to know to apply here. So this is great. This is a very good website and gives you what you need to know. And then lastly, they've got their contact info. You can email them. They've got who the program officer is. So the interpretation on this is when the contact information is this specific, they want you to contact them. So if I'm in Austin, I am emailing Melanie and saying, hey, can we set up a quick call about our program? We'd love to apply. Just want to make sure that you think we're as good of a fit as we do. Right there. If I'm in Chicago, Denver, or Broward, I'm going to do the same for Kathy. But you have 100% got your pathway here. You have looked at the site, you've got a mission match, that you've got an activities match. If you're in the geography, you've got the geographic match, they're open to new organizations. They've got someone you can talk to. all in all, this is the ideal funder, provided you are in Austin, Chicago, Denver, or Broward County. So this is kind of a best case example of a really good website where everything is there that you need. For the most part, when you're looking at funder websites, you are going to have all this. You are going to be able to do that evaluation based on what you're looking at. So for the most part, this is easy mode. The bad news is about 90% of funders don't have websites. The 10% that do are generally the largest and generally who you want to start with. And if you're new at getting grant funding, most of the ones that you're going to run into are going to have websites. But as you're going and you're already talking to your community foundation, you're already talking to whatever the big name in your town is, you've already talked to their foundation. Eventually, you're going to get to a spot where you're looking into funders that don't have websites. So that's where we have to go to our friend, the IRS Form 990. For any of you who've looked at these before, they have all of the warmth and love of an IRS document, but they do have the basics of what you need. They're going to have contact info. They're going to have at least the skeleton of their application process. You're going to be able to look at past grants, and you'll be able to make some judgment. Downsides on this is that they generally lag a couple of years because, like, for example, most funders right now are just finishing their 2020 audit and filling this out for 2020, which means it goes to the IRS, this fall. The IRS then scans it. It gets out onto GuideStar and other sites that actually have these, early next year. So you're looking at a real lag. And normally that's not a big deal. But with the global pandemic and all the changes to giving that we had in 2020 and 2021, that lag is going to be a little bit weird because you're going to see a lot of organizations shifted to pandemic giving for those 2 years. And now we're going to shift back to their normal giving that they were doing before the pandemic. And that's going to take a little while to show up on 990s. So that's a fair warning. But if you're looking and they fund all sorts of job programs, you're still good. There's just some of those edge cases might be a little more difficult. So I don't want to show you the 990 in a vacuum here. So we are going to talk about another fake organization. So the organization is it's a job training organization based in Omaha, but serves all of Nebraska. And they need some funding for their apprenticeship program for women and minorities who are underrepresented in craft careers. And those have 3 locations. There's one in Omaha, one in Lincoln, and one other location that basically serves the rural western half. I lived adjacent to Nebraska for a little bit, and I know that all of the people are in the lower left-hand corner. That's their service area. And like many people, they are trying to expand their programs and need $200,000 to get some equipment and to expand their welding and HVAC programs. So they have gone and found a funder that they think might be a fit, and all they can find is that funder is 990. Now, this particular funder, the Sherwood Foundation, does have a website, but we're going to use their 990. So first things first, this is the first page. The first thing you've got is their contact information. You've at the very least know who they are and what their phone number is. So if you know nothing else, you can at least call up and say, hey, I think we might be a fit for you. What do you think? We're hopefully gonna be able to find out more, but at the very least, you've got something. The other thing you will find on the form is they've got their basically their leadership team. So it's their highest paid employees. And hey, we know that Jerry Bexton here is the director of education. So this might be who we want to talk to if we're going to talk about our education programs. So one of the other things then here is normally this Part 15 supplementary information. As you're scrolling through the document, you'll see this, and this is normally where you would have information about how to apply. So who to send it to, whether it's a letter, whether they have a form, any deadlines, any of that. But a lot of organizations click this little box that I have got the arrow pointing to that says Click here. The foundation only makes contributions to pre-selected organizations and doesn't accept requests. So remember 10 minutes ago, I said, if you see that for a funder, they're not a good fit. Only on the 990, you can ignore that. A lot of organizations check this, I think, because they do not want to end up in the database. They don't want to be overrun with submissions somehow. So there are many, many funders that I know absolutely will accept unsolicited or unsolicited requests. I mean, funders who have websites with online application processes and all of that will have this check sometimes. So I feel free to ignore that if you see it. Don't let that stop you. Normally, for a different organization, you would have information here about how to apply. You're going to want to talk to that organization anyway before you send in something to confirm, but that's there. So the real important thing in determining, oh, this is also a little bit blurry on a large screen, I apologize. The only thing that really matters is looking at their past giving for you to know if this is potentially a funder for you. And remember, the program that we're talking about is getting jobs and training for people underrepresented in the crafts. And this organization is funding workforce and innovation programs for a Hispanic serving organization. The RISE Academy that they're funding here works to transition prisoners to sustainable lives. And they're interested in women's programming. And also importantly is if you look at the amount they're giving, remember we need $200,000, they are making large grants. If this was a funder that had all of these things going for it, but was making $1,500 grants, not necessarily a great fit for a $200,000 project. But based on what they're giving here, absolutely a good fit throughout. So hopefully you're looking at websites and not at 990s, but now I think you can at least have a little bit of a toolkit to go in and look at them. So unless you've got, I don't see any questions popped up in the Q&A. Unless you've got any questions on that, let's go talk about evaluating federal grants. And again, I'm saying federal because we've got people from all over. This is not just federal. So first things first, looking at federal grants. And the nice part about government grants is they spell it all out for you. And we're going to look at that in a little bit. First and foremost is your eligibility. So is the opportunity open to the type of organization you are? So nonprofit, if you're working with a unit of government, if you're working with a community college, whatever that is, do you at the bare minimum legally qualify? Next is geography. Again, for federal programs, usually there's not a geographic component, but often you will find some that have either a regional or a specific state focus. Sometimes that is, where there's especially hard hit with unemployment, or there's an Appalachian recovery program that does a lot of the Appalachian states, something like that. Whether that grant is focused on your population. So the stuff we talked about, age, income, demographics, etc. So very first, check these very basic yes, no legal things. Does that work? Next is thinking about your organizational capacity. So again, like we just talked about the size of the award, any government grant is going to be fairly large. So you want to make sure that the expected size of the award is in line with the size of your organization. So calling that right. So again, we'll look through how to do this, but you want to look through and see, okay, we're going to make, this program is making grants that are $2 million or above. Our organizational budget is 50,000. Maybe they're looking for somebody bigger. Versus, this is going to make grants for $10,000, which is rare for government, but, and we've got a $2 million budget for this project. Do we want to bother? Also making sure that you have the infrastructure in place to carry out the required work. That is less of a yes and no, but we'll talk about that in a minute. You want to basically make sure that you can display and you can demonstrate to the government agency that you are able to do the work they want you to do. That also means that you've got the staff and expertise available to carry out the work. So either you have it, you can get it quickly, or you have a partnership that can have that, which takes us to, occasionally there are required partnerships with federal grants. And I see we've got a question here. Okay, I will get to that. Yes. Okay, I will get to that. Don't let me not answer that. So potential required partnerships, sometimes they require shared work. Again, we'll talk about this in an example in a minute. Sometimes you have to coordinate between state agencies, local agencies. So you've got a federal grant or a state grant that also wants you to work with the local school system or the State Department of Labor or something like that. Also, you've got to have access to the population that's required. So again, we'll look at all this in practice in a moment. But making sure that, for example, they want to make the program again is for that transition age youth, and your entire program is focused on professional development for mid-career people in crafts. Maybe you don't have that access. Also, sometimes you need to be able to talk about how you're working within an ecosystem. So how are you part of a pipeline? How are you part of a prison to success pipeline or something like that? And talk about how you're working with all these other organizations. So again, sometimes there are those requirements in there that go beyond you. The other one is required activities. We're going to talk about that too. So understanding all of the work required for the program. And what's great about government grants is they are not shy about telling you what they want you to do. A lot of times writing a government grant is just the RFP says you have to do A, B, and C, and you write back and say, here's how we're going to do A, B, and C. But making sure that you want to do that work too. So you'll see sometimes there is the main thing, and then there's some sub things you have to do, and making sure that you want to do that work. Also, that you have a demonstrated history of doing that work. Again, for a federal grant and most grants, they don't just want to know, yeah, we plan to do it. They want to know, here's how we've done this in the past, and here's what we're going to do. So knowing that you're a good investment. And again, whether that is access to expertise in-house or whether that is access to others. So that's sort of the real quick and dirty how to give that the overview. We're going to go through a NOFA in a moment to kind of show that in reality. But then you've got this other thing out there, which is not just a yes, no. It's not can we apply, it is should we apply. Just because you're eligible for a government grant, or really any grant, but this really comes in, this comes in play mostly with government grants because they're often very time consuming. Should you apply? Are you comfortable with the risk reward ratio? So are you comfortable that your staff might have to spend 25 hours working on this? Is whatever amount of money that's out there worth it to you? Will the program provide a good return on your investment? So is this something where you are chasing some dollars, or is this something where you are going to have one of your core functions paid for? Is it worth the time, the treasure, and the tears to complete the proposal and go through the process? And is it funding something, like I said, is it funding something you already want to do, or are you chasing funding? So I don't think many of you who I've talked to are at this point yet, but there's often this temptation of, well, we are doing program X. This will fund program X as long as we do some of Y. And making sure that you're comfortable with that, and that you're not just going after this money because you need some for program X, and now you're starting this whole other program in program Y. So making sure that A, is funding a core thing you're doing, and B, that it's not just you trying to get money in the door. I know we've got to make payroll and things like that, but it is sometimes not worth it to just go after that. So size and number of awards is really how you figure out that ROI. How much is the program providing, and how many grants will it make? And we'll see this in real life in a second. But one of the things to look at is, given the number of awards, are you competitive? So I use this example all the time. We see this a lot with federal grants. It'll be, a grant for a clearinghouse on information on best practices in early career job placement. And they'll be awarding one grant. And you realize it's probably going to go to Johns Hopkins, because it always goes to Johns Hopkins or Harvard or someone like that can start this new institute to talk about this and all of that. So making sure that you are competitive to do that. So, if there is 30 awards, are you one of the 30 best in the country at doing what you're doing? If you can honestly answer yes at that, it's probably worth the risk. Does the average grant work with your budget? We talked about this a little bit on size of your organization, but if you've got a $2 million program and the average grant is $50,000, is that worth the time you're going to invest? Or will this fund half of your program or a big chunk of your program? So yeah, it's absolutely worth the time. The other one is, will you lose money? And this is rare, but many federal grants require a match. Sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes you have got to do some other things that you're not already doing that are going to cost you money. It is possible, but not probable, but possible to lose money getting a grant. Watch out for that. Again, it's rare, but it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at that return on investment. Is it worth the time? Is it worth our energy? Are we actually going to end up in a worse spot than where we started if we take this? The other thing I'm going to put in here is just practical considerations. So do you have the time to develop a compelling proposal? A lot of these are a lot of work, talking with government proposals. Do you have the infrastructure to manage the post-award requirements? And I've heard this a lot talking with organizations like yours is, well, we didn't take the grant. It's usually a federal or state grant. We didn't take it because it was going to be so much work to manage it after we got it. And that is 100% valid concern. Most federal awards and many state awards are reimbursement based, so you have to track spending. You're probably hiring some people, so you've got to have the HR in place to make sure you're doing fair hiring and all of that. There's usually some sort of evaluation required, so you've got to make sure you've got the capacity to do that. You're better off not getting a grant if you can say we don't have the capacity to do this, than you are getting it, finding out you don't have the capacity and not meeting the grant's requirements. So are you able to actually carry it out? And the other thing, which is a little bit internal, but is everybody committed to the process? So there is nothing worse than having to put in a huge amount of time and effort into a grant that the CEO is not committed to. The development director found it, they really want to do it, but the CEO doesn't think it's great. The CEO is like, all right, if we get it, whatever, we'll do it. We're going to talk about in a later episode. We're going to talk about building a team around for your grant, make sure everybody's on the same page. But having something that doesn't have buy-in is a terrible thing to spend a whole bunch of time on. So making sure that you've got that buy-in. There is one exception to all of this. So if you are an organization that's committed to a new program and you haven't really developed it yet, sometimes one of those giant federal proposals can be a good catalyst to make you actually do it. Going into it thinking, well, we might not get it, but at least we've got to try. So you get a goal and a deadline to work against. You'll have specific requirements to meet. And more importantly, there is almost always next year. So you're working on your federal grant, you're working on your big state grant, you don't get it in time, or you figure out you're not able to do everything that it requires. You've got some time to work on it. So absolutely, if you have that luxury of not absolutely needing the money right now, it can be a good catalyst to just take that federal opportunity, take that large state opportunity, and work towards it. So we're going to talk about doing this practically in the NOFA. How do we look through a federal grant and apply this? But I would like to take a quick temperature of the room here with the poll, because we've just kind of covered a lot. I'd like to know what best describes your thoughts right now on evaluating opportunities. Give this about 20 more seconds. All right. All right, I am glad that nobody has answered they don't feel great about their ability to do this. So a couple of you think you can do this great. A couple of you think it's gonna, you have to think through it a little bit, but you've got it. I am so happy to see that. I'm glad that you guys have the confidence to do that. So let's just look at this. We're gonna end up here. We've got about 10 minutes left here, and I do have that one question. Let's look at an example of a federal, so I'm calling it a NOFA. It's called a NOFA, a NOFO, an RFP. Depending on your state, depending on your agency, it gets called all sorts of things. So let's look about one of these for real. So we're going to look at eligibility. We're going to look at that total funding and see if it's worth it. We're going to look at that number of grants and the average award by total funding. We're going to look at the required activities, and we're going to look at the other requirements. So first things first, assuming you're all you. We don't have a fake organization on this one. This is you. You are all who you are. So we are looking at the executive summary of the description. We've just gotten this opportunity from the Employment and Training Administration of the Department of Labor. It looks really interesting. So this is a program for young adults and youth coming out of the justice system, getting them into good jobs, keeping them out of prison, letting them have successful lives. So it is open. We're just looking at the executive summary here. We're gleaning a lot. So we know what kind of things they want to do. We're looking at this and seeing there's some leadership development, there's community violence initiative stuff. Applicants are nonprofits and government entities. The average funding range is about 2 to 4 million. So this looks really good, but don't stop here because there's a lot this is not saying. You know, like I said, we've got, I forgot I had these arrows here, sorry. These 3 key things. So what you're supposed to do, who the eligibles are, and the amount. But let's look here at the award amounts. So they're expecting to have 85 million to fund approximately 29 grants. So like we talked about, if you feel like you are one of the 29 top programs in the country that is doing this, absolutely go ahead. If you're just starting out in this, you're not confident in your abilities, and you think there's probably 29 organizations better at this than you, maybe this one's not for you. The other thing is to the award limits here. So there's two different funds they're doing for direct and intermediate, but I think most of you will qualify as direct. So you can get $2 million. So good. I mean, that is a significant chunk for a significant program. So what else can we see here? If we scroll farther down, we know that they're doing this in 2 rounds. So the first one is a little bit smaller than the second one. There's going to be 40 million available in round 1, 45 in round 2. So we've got a better sense about what is going on, what the pace of the awards are, how much we can get. So this is looking pretty good so far. I mean, this is 30, almost 30 grants for 2 million each is pretty good. So let's then look at the eligibility. So a few things going on here for most of you. That is that nonprofits other than institutions of higher ed carrying a 501c3 status. This actually relates to the questions in the Q&A that I'll get to at the end. But for most of you, you are looking eligible. So let's get to the big thing here, which is these required activities. So every single one of these federal programs, if you've ever looked at one, is going to have this long list of things you have to do. So you have to be comfortable. A, you have to want to do these. B, you have to be able to do these. So looking through, again, if you looked at that executive summary and you're like, yeah, this is us, keep going. Keep reading all of this to make sure that you want to provide all this. So for example, you have got to be working with how you're going to provide employment and career services in all of these areas, that you're going to be working with individual development plans, that you've got local labor market information, that you've identified barriers, all of this. So if you're looking at this second bullet here and kind of freaking out, maybe you pass. If you're looking at it like, oh yeah, we've got all that, keep going. So this actually keeps going on, by the way. Each of these is just a shot of kind of the top of the page. There's more for all of them. But again, like I mentioned, a federal proposal and most state proposals will tell you exactly what you need to do. Then there is our required activities here. So we have to have our paid work experiences, and they're telling you exactly what age group you're doing it for, how much they have to make, et cetera, et cetera. It's very exact. This goes on for, this one goes on, paid work experience goes on for another page, and there's several more pages of requirements. So I'm not going to go through these all, but the upshot is when you're looking at one of these federal or state proposals, they're going to have everything you need to do, and they're listed exhaustively. And I cannot tell you how many organizations have had this heartbreak of reading page 1 and going, oh, this is totally for me. Let's assemble our team. We're going to get going. We're going to write this. It's going to be great. Only to get to the activities required in page 35 and realize that not only do they need to have their job trainer, but they also need a social worker and this and that and the other. So, being able to look through this and seeing sort of this exact language is going to tell you exactly what's expected of you. And you should be able to pretty quickly realize if that is you or not you. So I want to get to the question that was in the Q&A. Someone asked, are grants available to for-profit organizations involved in workforce development? So that is a sort of a big question. So for private funders, so foundations, generally not. Legally, they can make a grant to a for-profit if they are doing the work of a nonprofit, but they generally don't. One of the ways to get around that, though, is to work with a nonprofit partner. So that can be, if you have a partner you're doing the work with who's a nonprofit, so a community college, something like that, having the money go to them and then you being a sub-awardee of that is the easiest way to do that. You can also have them act as a fiscal agent, which means same thing, the money goes to them, but they then give you the money. They usually take like a 10% cut. Community foundations are good for doing that too. But really what it comes down to is, are you doing the work that would be a nonprofit doing it? And if so, then you've got to find that legal structure, whether that's a nonprofit partner, a fiscal agent, et cetera, because it's really hard as a for-profit to get foundation money. With private funders, there actually, or I'm sorry, with public funders, there might be some opportunity there. And I don't think, I should have looked at it while we were there, but I don't want to pause too long. I don't know if this one said, I'm scrolling back here. So nonprofit institution of higher education, union training funds. Now, so this one, yeah, this one is not eligible for for-profits, but some government funds will actually fund for-profit organizations. So there is that opportunity there. So having said all that, we are just about out of time. I didn't see any other questions pop up. If you've got one though, please feel free. And I do want to, another quick poll, just because no one wants to fill out big evaluation surveys. I'm going to do a quick rating of today's webinar while I talk about what's next. So your next steps, you've all gone to the resource page to sign up. Explore what else is there. We've got some great stuff there, including, like I said, there's a one-pager on kind of doing this evaluation for if a funder is a fit or not. Also, register for next month's webinar, and that's going to be August 17th. And that is, how do you identify if your program is grant ready? So we're going to talk about how to talk about your programming in a way that funders want to see it, and how to make sure your programming is done in a way that funders want to see. I personally think that's a great one. I think they're all good, but also, if you haven't signed up for a coaching session, you've got some specific questions, starting with how do I do this to how do I approach this specific funder, please sign up for one of those. Again, you can go to the resource page and grab that. And with that, we are at time. I saw Heather put in chat a thank you for everybody coming. Thank you to all of you. Oh, Heather actually put the registration in there too. Thank you. So if you haven't registered for August 17th, it's in the chat. The recording for this will be up probably by tomorrow if you want to see it again on that resource page. And thank you all for coming. And I look forward to talking with you in coaching sessions and seeing you in August. So thanks, everyone.